Hello, everybody. Back once again. It is America's #1 chadcast. We have an absolutely incredible show lined up tonight. We got some legends with us. We have Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, accompanied by probably the greatest political cartoonist of our time, Ben Garrison. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing great.
Good, Alan.
Doing good. Awesome. So, Shiva, you had a Puerto Rican Day Parade today in Boston. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a annual parade, Alan. It's, I think, one of the largest Puerto Rican Day parades. We had, it started at Boylston Street and went all the way through the Common. Tremendous support. And obviously, a lot of people had seen the video of what occurred on July 22nd at Elizabeth Warren's rally. So people are very supportive, not only citizens, but also the police, the Boston police, who've always been targeted as being violent. And in fact, they were very supportive and wanted to make sure that this guy was properly, justice was served. So it was a great day. I mean, it's all up on video, but there's a significant number of minorities in Massachusetts. A lot of them do not vote because they don't really like either party. Neither party has ever served their interests. The average net worth of a black person in Boston is $8. So that's what Elizabeth Warren and the swamp of Massachusetts has delivered, basically nothing to everyday people, be it black or white or, people who struggle.
And for those of you who don't know, what happened last week was pretty historical, pretty hilarious. I mean, I was literally, no exaggeration, I was like on the ground laughing because of what happened was Shiva was assaulted. Ben, it was like a meme coming to life, basically, where a guy wearing a shirt that says liberal, his shirt literally said liberal, and I think on the back it said Democrat, assaulted Dr. Shiva. And did you happen to see that, Ben?
Oh yeah, I saw it, and to me, it's a metaphor for the current environment where the left really has no argument. And when they have no argument, what do? They resort to violence. When somebody resorts to violence, that means they don't have any credible counter argument, and that's what we saw right there. And it's symbolic of the divide between the two ideologies in the country, conservative and the lefty progressives. And there it was in a nutshell. And to me, I was pretty revolted by it because what they were trying to do really was, keep Dr. Shiva from talking. I mean, they could have damaged his teeth, busted a tooth, or cut his lip, and that's very symbolic of trying to silence him right there. And Elizabeth Warren, I guess, condemned it, but then I think I read on your tweet, Dr. Shiva, that she invited him back into her town hall or something. So
yeah, so
Ben,
what happened was. So I did get, my upper lip and lower lip did bleed. I have 2 chipped teeth, and I may have to get root canal. So the fortunate thing is not a tooth was knocked out. And I think, Ben, that, we both sort of look at the world in an artistic way, and I like the way you look at it. I love your artwork. But one of the important things is the image there of a guy with a white T-shirt with liberal punching a megaphone, and at the other end of the megaphone is a dark-skinned American, right? That symbol pretty much says it all, that these people are the racists and they want to suppress free speech, because moments prior to that, I had invited these people going into Elizabeth Warren's to have a discourse. I said, look, you guys are from the 60s. You want to have discourse. You're going into a nice air-conditioned room theater. Why don't you come on over to our side and let's talk about race? And moments before the hit took place, I had said, look, we don't produce enough doctors. We don't produce enough engineers. And I said, Elizabeth Warren is a scumbag lawyer lobbyist. By the way, to me, the term scumbag is a technical term. It's not any other term by that. It's a scum that's on the top of the septic tanks that you put into a bag. It's actually a wastage.
You don't want to insult scumbags too much by comparison.
Right.
Wow.
but I think the important thing is, Ben, I think when you look at it from an artistic or a symbol standpoint, if that was a Trump T-shirt hitting a dark-skinned American or a black American, there would be vigils in front of Trump's house. Hollywood people would be coming in.
Riots. 24/7 news coverage.
Riots. It'd be 20. Instead, what happened was Chris Cuomo tried to diminish the thing, like wondering if anything really happened to me. CNN didn't carry it. The Boston Globe didn't carry it. The New York Times didn't carry it. Who did carry it was people like Mike Cernovich, people like you, people like the Proud Boys, and you go down the list. These are people who are branded as racists and right-wingers. So the quote-unquote racists are the ones who talked about a racist, violent hate crime, and none of the people who claim that they stand against racism did anything about it. So I think it's an awesome opportunity for us to really discuss race in this country from a truly deep perspective on how both of these two heads of the establishment want race war and they profit from it.
Well, to me, too, you can hearken back to the start of the Obama administration, and that was supposed to be symbolic in that it was going to end racial division in America. You probably remember that. And what he did throughout his administration was make it worse. Any opportunity he had to drive the wedge between, racial amity was. He seized the chance. I mean, I'm thinking of the Trayvon Martin, used that as a means to, his whole administration actually made things worse. And so at the end, we get Black Lives Matter, we get shooting of the policemen, and we get, a lot of, it was, how can anybody say it was better after Barack Obama?
Yeah, it was
I mean,
really
what Barack
bad.
Obama did was he had black and blue fighting, right? He wanted to unleash black and blue. And in the questions, what we've asked Elizabeth Warren, Ben, is, do Black lives matter, or are you just exploiting Black lives? And that is what the history of the left wing of the establishment has been. And
that can probably go back to LBJ. And,
exactly.
LBJ famously said, well, we're going to get these blacks, so he didn't say the word black, we're going to keep them on the reservation for 200 years by means of, welfare and brainwashing.
Yeah.
So, and LBJ was actually, and this was released in one of the WikiLeaks documents, that he was actually for a while a member of the KKK, which had its origins in the Democratic Party. So,
wow, I didn't know that. You're saying he was part of the KKK?
No, early on he was. That's what they said. I mean, but the left media was not going to, of course, broadcast that. But he and one of his compadres from your state, Massachusetts, Edward Kennedy, he's the one who made it possible to have, kind of open borders that we have now, condition people to accept, have the wide open, because they're part of the same deep state globalist thing. And the voters in Massachusetts are complicit in his election, because he was elected, I think, about a year after he killed that poor girl in Chappaquiddick. And now, what are the voters thinking, electing a man like that, who ended up being called I think they called him the liberal lion of the Senate, for so many years, and he was just a fat, degenerate, skirt chasing loser, and yet they continue to elect him. And Massachusetts today continues to elect the self-serving political hack named Elizabeth Warren, who claims, as they always do, that they're for the little guy. They're going to bring you free stuff, little guy. I'm fighting for you hard. But at the same time, she lives in a $5 million mansion. She takes political contributions from Wall Street and the banks. She's just another Hillary Clinton, really. She's what can you say about it? I mean, this is the face of the deep state, and then she has the audacity to claim she's Indian heritage.
Well, what's interesting, Ben, is most of the quote unquote artists, who are really not artists, a lot of these guys are trust fund babies, have gone into advertising, and that engine, Madison Avenue, is used to completely manipulate Americans. You just talked about Edward Kennedy being framed as a gay, I think he wrote a book called The Next Lion or something like that, or The Big Lion or something, trying to frame him as this great statesman.
He was a lie, and he was lying.
Yeah, and I think to Kennedy, harass was 2 words. It's a joke, but but with Kennedy, here's a guy who absolutely with Chappaquiddick, he didn't have to survive the same laws that you or I or anyone listening out there would have to. So the establishment, it's a great case in point where they have 2 different laws. One set of law.
Yep. He should have been in jail for manslaughter at the very least.
Right. He wasn't even arrested, I believe. There was no mugshot, nothing. So one set of laws for them and another set of laws for us. In the incident that Alan is discussing with this guy who punched me in the face, caught on video, it's not like he came from across the street to hit me. After he was arrested and booked, he was let on his own recognizance. Elizabeth Warren invited him back into that town hall and gave him, as I understand, VIP treatment where he was allowed in with the press. Okay.
That is absurd.
And to just to tell, everyone needs to understand that's why our campaign is going to be a historic one, and winning it will be extremely important for the American people, because it's time that we all live by the same laws. A few months ago, Charlie Baker, who's a never Trumper governor, son sexually assaulted a woman in an airplane. No one from the Me Too movement said anything. No one brought this. He wasn't arrested. No mugshot was taken. And in Massachusetts, since we're talking about Massachusetts, on the one hand, you have the so-called left, which basically takes advantage of poor blacks and tries to characterize, poor whites as racist. On the other hand, you have poor whites like the right wing establishment. And I want to separate that from the conservatives, which is the other wing of the establishment, which points to poor blacks. A case in point is this guy, Howie Carr, who put up a mugshot of me. Ben, you may have seen this. It was a false claim. The woman had done this to other people. It was outright dismissed. And so what you have is the left wing tries to call me a white supremacist because I support poor whites who've been mistreated. And the right is going to try to characterize a dark-skinned Indian guy who beats white women. So these people use race, and they have two different yardsticks for themselves. And I think discussing what occurred with that mugshot to me, discussing how this guy was allowed to punch me, could have knocked out my teeth, and was allowed back into Elizabeth Warren's home, is a big opportunity to really have the fact that the establishment loves race war. Barack Obama loves race war. In Massachusetts, I got to tell you, there's no party of Lincoln here. It's all Democrats. And Charlie Baker's a Democrat, and all the three Republicans running against me are basically Democrats. One of the guys, we call him Old Man Kingston, is a guy who gave $250,000 to Bill Clinton for speaking engagement. Another guy voted for Joe Biden. His campaign manager is a Saudi lobbyist, and he faked a picture with Trump. And the third woman ran a lottery and is an old Romneyite. And as everyone knows, Romney started Obamacare. So what you have is both of these people are essentially, what's fascinating about Massachusetts, Ben, is that they're just one, and it's not even any, they don't even try to hide it. So that's why in the last election, Trump, his 1 million votes, only, in our view, only 200,000 came from the Republicans. There's only 450,000 Republicans. 80% of his votes came from independents. And that's what the opportunity is, that Massachusetts is fundamentally still, where the American Revolution took place, nearly 55-60% are independents. And I think by defeating Elizabeth Warren and the establishment in the sewer here, we can send an inspiring wave across this country that you don't need to join any of these political parties. You can stand on your own 2 feet, and you can win with very little money. You don't need all this money. Most of the money that these guys raise just circulates among themselves. That's why I think it's a big opportunity, not only to win here, but to set a big earthquake across this country.
Wow! And have you guys seen?
Well, that earthquake already kind of.
I'm sorry, Ben. Go ahead. Oh, well, go ahead, sir. And then I got a point. Well, I'll say it right now because it really speaks to the absurd overconfidence and hubris of Elizabeth Warren. Have you guys seen the recent? I think it was New York Magazine cover.
Running.
Yeah, it's on Shiva's Twitter if you want to pull it up. They're calling her like the front runner of 2020. And there was one publication, I don't recall, but I think we'll pull it up as well, where they mentioned this man's assault, the guy that assaulted you. I think his name was Paul Solivoy or something like that. They talk about the assault and that somebody was arrested at the rally, but they don't mention you. Like Ben.
Yeah, WHDH, the local media, Ben and Alan, does not want to even mention my name. That's how racist they are. And I think, look, I was just recently with Joe Arpaio and one of the guys from Blacks
for Trump, right?
Blacks for Trump. Great guy.
Yeah, he's got great hair.
He goes, it's time that the conservatives started using and exposing the racism of the liberal elites. We shouldn't shy away from it. The other side of the Democratic Party, which I call the quote unquote Republicans in Massachusetts, tell people to shut up. Don't talk about racism. And that gives the opportunity for the Democrats to just own racism. What better opportunity than a brown-skinned Indian guy to bring together black and white? Red, white, and blue becomes becomes brown. So, that's what the opportunity we have to really point out who the real racists are. And I think we should keep putting the prefix before Elizabeth Warren, racist Elizabeth Warren, racist Elizabeth Warren, racist Elizabeth Warren, because that's what she is. She abused affirmative action.
Cultural appropriator.
Yeah, cultural appropriator. A guy punches a dark-skinned American in the face. She invites him back in. By the way, Ben, her condemnation was the confrontation was wrong, quote unquote. And by the way, in 2012, she used the exact same soundbite when a reporter got hit by one of her supporters. The confrontation, it's almost like they cut and pasted it.
This empty platitude. That's what they all use, empty platitudes. That's one of the reasons Hillary was defeated. She came up with empty bombast, and she took all the Democrat voters and, including the blacks, but, in the Rust Belt state, she took them all. I don't even have to go there. They're going to vote for me by, automatically. I got it by default, just like Edward Kennedy gets it by default in Massachusetts. He got it by default year after year or election after election. But that's
they think that we still have a monarchy.
And you're riding the wave of this sea change. So I think you have an excellent chance of bringing down this the political hack from the deep state. And make no bones about it, that's what she represents. I mean, we know that she's got inextricable ties to Harvard and how much she got paid to be a speaker there. I forgot what it was, close to $1 million, I think.
Well, she got a $10 million endowment from a law firm, Leo Gottlieb law firm. Her chair is called Leo Gottlieb. The way it works is typically someone sends up, basically, Ben, anyone on this call could become a professor at Harvard. It's all pay to play. So she got, the Leo Gottlieb. Yeah, they set up a chair, put 10 million into an endowment, by the way, which they gamble on Wall Street, and that goes to fund her salary. So that's why Elizabeth Warren is basically pro-Wall Street. She's never said anything against Harvard University. It's a $40 billion hedge fund. Never said a word against it. In fact, today, after our Puerto Rican Day rally, we drove through Harvard Square, and out the megaphone, we were saying no to racism, no to Elizabeth Warren, that Harvard is a $40 billion hedge fund. Think twice before you send your kids to this fake university. And that's the opportunity we have, man, to really talk about the truth, that all this hype that's been created, nice red buildings, it's, Ivy colors, all branding, that you should be so fortunate to go here, that you should be so fortunate to listen to these experts, when in fact, every major economic calamity, every probably major poverty cycle can be traced to some expert at Harvard. That's what that institution is. If we want a longitude and a latitude of the deep state, the actual center point, it's Harvard University. That's where all of this stuff comes from.
It's the point of the liberal spear, so to speak, and they think they control the culture and the thinking of America by means of promoting politicians such as Pocahontas.
Well, one of the things, Ben, we've thought about is this. This is an interesting fact I dug up. In 1640, Harvard as an institution was going bankrupt. Everyone should look this up. They were going bankrupt. What did they do? They went to a Christian missionary organization and they said, hey, look, can you give us some money? We're going to build an Indian college. It was the second brick building they built. This Indian college was supposed to educate hundreds or thousands of Native Americans. They only helped 4 Native Americans. They used that space to put the Harvard printing press in and educate tons of whites. So what's fascinating is it's cultural appropriation. That's how they bailed themselves out. They use Native Americans to bail themselves out. So if that, since Harvard and the theoreticians.
He's an echo of that, isn't she?
What's that?
He's an echo of that corruption.
Exactly. It's from 1640, to today. It's a continuation of that corruption. So, these guys want to rename things. Well, why doesn't Harvard rename their university to Indian University, right? Or Indian College? Because that's how they bailed themselves out. John Harvard, I'm pretty sure, was a slave owner himself, because in Britain, that's where he was from. They called it indentured servitude, AKA slavery. That was a code word for it. It's named after John Harvard. So I think it's a great opportunity. The race issue, we should put a mirror right up to them. That's what occurred on July 22nd. We put the mirror right up to them. And as you said earlier, Ben, they could not stand it. That guy's calling me a racist, and I call him a racist, and his chips burned out in his brain. And by the way, this guy, Ben and Alan, if you've looked at him, he's a quote unquote artist. Gets even more interesting. His artistry is selling photographs of black and white Barbies naked. Okay.
I saw that.
Yeah. So
disturbing. Imagine being that guy. You're this progressive. You're super hyped to support Elizabeth Warren, but actually you're probably the most notorious racial assaulter in the country right now.
Yeah, we got a picture of him right here.
And one thing I really like about Dr. Shiva, I never really considered, all right, let's own the race issue, especially when it comes to Harvard. Whites have the worst chance of getting into Harvard. They have a very poor chance. It's not good. And what I liked about Dr. Shiva, he talks about the fact that poor whites are the most screwed over population in this country. And he's willing to talk about while other people aren't.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, Alan, poor whites in Massachusetts, 3 times the national opioid addiction, there's a great chart that came out showing how infant mortality in other Western countries is dropping, and in the United States is actually growing explosively. None of these issues are discussed, and that's what President Trump, the reason he won was he was talking the truth, and he was talking about issues that were not discussed. In fact, one of my earlier advisors at MIT, who's maybe considered far lefty, Noam Chomsky, but even Noam was saying, this was back in 2007, he was saying that neoliberalism was going to fail, that there would be someone like Trump. And he said, if you want to know what's going on right now, Shiva, because I just gotten back from India on a Fulbright, he said, go listen to Rush Limbaugh. So think about this. Noam Chomsky is telling me to go listen to Rush Limbaugh because he said the issues of poor whites is not being discussed. It's being dismissed by the elites on the West Coast and the East Coast. That's what they've been doing for a long time. And the essential goal of this, in my view, is on the one hand, you have a bunch of scumbag elites, and I think, again, that's a technical term, who basically play lottery on big hedge funds. They move money around, and that's how they get to live in the Hamptons, et cetera. Those same people are the ones who, on the other extreme, want to support gangs, illegal immigration, want to keep people on welfare. They want to create 2 sets of leeches, and they want to arm these guys, right? These guys have a lot of weapons. And in the middle is the American working class, black, white, yellow, red, whatever color you want. And that is what they're trying to do. On the one hand, you have leeches on one side and leeches on the other side, and we're all squeezed in between. And the establishment supports both ends of that leechery, if you want. I don't even know if there's a term like that. Yeah.
Well, one of the there's a lot of faces that could be applied to the pushers of this leechery, but one I was reading about, in fact, I'm working on a cartoon today, is a Jack Dorsey, a billionaire, the creator of Twitter. He lives in San Francisco, and I'm sure he lives in a nice bubble where in a liberal echo chamber. But all the conservatives are getting shadow banned. I'm shadow banned. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
Everybody who's conservative is now shadow banned, even though these people, they're really good at lying and gaslighting us and telling us this isn't happening exactly when they're doing it. He said something about he wants to increase the collective health of the nation's conversation. Okay, well, I kind of read these words, and there's more to it. He said, he wants to keep everything civil, and but the collective health. Well, that sort of sounds like kind of collectivism, doesn't it? Okay, well, who decides what's a healthy conversation or not? Well, of course he does, and his liberal ilk get to decide what is healthy. So essentially, it's an extension of too many universities, which are socialist indoctrination centers, and of course they're not allowing free speech on campus anymore. And then we have Google and YouTube and Twitter, and they're starting to just outright block conservative voices.
And Facebook.
It's in Facebook too. Yeah, it's similar to shoving our megaphone in our face, isn't it? But this guy gets to decide what is collective health of a conversation, not us. And if he could paint conservatives as bullies or trolls or hate speakers. And what is hate speech? He defines what that is. Well, hate speech is somebody who doesn't want open borders. Hate speech is, somebody who doesn't want to be attacked on either side by these leeches. And so when that happens, then all of a sudden we're shadow banned because we get caught up in his algorithm, and other people. There are blacklists that are circulating among the left. and people are you don't need to be trolled, and you don't have to endure all these Nazis and fascists. Just sign up to this list, and all of a sudden, that means that they don't have access to a lot of conservative voices that they may want to hear. So I don't know how this is going to end, but it's not going to come to a very collectively healthy debate result when you get one side having the megaphone and us, we get our megaphone shoved in our faces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Nunes is proposing a bill to do something about it, to sue them somehow. To me, a better solution might be what I think Kim.com is trying to develop, a new platform similar to Twitter, where conservatives won't be blocked.
Yeah, more competition.
The left has gotten control of so much of the ability to channel the conversation or censor it with YouTube and Twitter and on and on. And what they do, they just banned Alex Jones from Facebook and
wow, that happened today.
From live streaming, they banned him.
I think he got a 30-day ban from live streaming, both on Facebook and
YouTube.
Wow.
But you know what's interesting?
Yeah, that's incredible.
The day this attack took place on July 22nd, the next day we put up that video on Twitter and on Facebook. On 23rd, suddenly my account was blocked. It's never occurred ever in my history in Facebook.
Wow.
So it was blocked on the 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th. It was just day before that they unblocked it. And I escalated to a senior executive there, because I have I'm very fortunate to have a network because I'm in the tech industry, to find someone who knew, because everyone else has to send these stupid emails, right, to their help center, or you're victimized and you have to work. So I escalated. I said, look, you're in for a lawsuit. And I had CC'd my attorney. And I think they got scared because they probably looked at the fact that I do come out hard. We did shut down Gawker Media for untruthful speech. They lied. So they reinstated the account, but it's never occurred. So for 4 or 5 days, we weren't able to post anything after this. And that video was going viral on both Google, on Twitter as well as Facebook. But it's very important to understand that Facebook blocked my account right at the peak of this news story for 4 days. All of it's documented. The other thing, Ben, look, these guys, Twitter, Facebook, Google, none of these guys really did anything innovative. They basically were part of a clique. And that's why they became billionaires. When I created the first email system in Newark, New Jersey, we didn't have a clique there. But what's happened is Silicon Valley, you could have a person who's completely, frankly, not that intelligent, not that innovative, but if his mama and papa get him into Silicon Valley and he gets access to the VC network, his quote unquote innovation becomes out there. So if you look at things like Twitter, if you look at things like Facebook, and if you look at even things like Google, many of these
things like Tesla.
Yeah,
exactly.
Tesla,
Exactly.
Getting a whole bunch of money from taxpayers, and he's pursuing this green energy boondoggle with the cars that blow up. And I didn't mean to sidetrack you there, but it's
no, you're right. You're right.
Too. And if Tesla were alive today, I have a feeling Tesla would tell them, take my name off your company.
Yeah, it's basically an insider trading game that they have. And it's important to note that these guys have this huge hubris, thinking that they're so smart and so intelligent. Facebook, the guy stole it from someone else. Google's the search engines have existed for long periods of time.
There's a lot of CIA origins too. Google. Yep. What better way for CIA to collect info than to get something like Google and YouTube and of course Facebook to start getting everybody to voluntarily give up all the information about their lives.
Speaking of which, while we're on the subject of the internet, something I really want to ask you, Dr. Shiva, all these big tech companies have so much power. It's getting a little bit ridiculous. What's your take on a potential internet bill of rights or something like that? An internet bill of rights, essentially. What's your take on that, Dr. Shiva?
Well, here's the deal, right? Mm-hmm. You have space and time, right? When this medium came out, in the 80s, we used to call it hypermedia. It is called hypermedia text markup language, right? HTML. So it's hypermedia because it's almost in a fourth dimension. It's space, time, and it's another aspect to this. The problem is politicians in Congress do not understand technology, except for Rand Paul. And I think there's Thomas Massey, who came from MIT. And I'm not saying everyone needs to go to MIT, but we don't have enough doctors, engineers, plumbers, electricians in Congress. You have a bunch of scumbag career politicians. Again, scumbag's a technical term. So these guys have no idea of the ramifications of these technologies. So they're not even qualified to write any laws. How do the laws get written? By the deep state of lobbyists and political consultants. They're the ones who are writing the laws. And these guys are just talking heads who simply cut and paste what they're told and do it. But the entire laws are done by other people. So you pay enough lobbying money, Google, and those laws are created. But when you really step back and look at something like Facebook, you look at something like Twitter, you look at something like Google, they are in such a different dimension of operations that they are probably more powerful, and including Amazon, we should not forget Amazon, more powerful than any Fortune 20 organization that was about a decade or 2 decades ago. These organizations are not moving matter, which is in the space and time. They're moving bits and bits, which is in a hyperdimension. And when you start moving bits around ones and zeros, it is beyond space and time, which means you can own many other things, which the United States Constitution and the founders could not envision. But I think, to your point, Alan, the founders of this country were architects, visionaries, scientists, blacksmiths. They actually were there working. And I, as an engineer, I can tell you that one of the things we should do is probably, make Facebook and Google a public utility. That's one solution. The other is they should open up their architecture. So, for example, if you wanted to overnight, if Ben wanted to create his version of Facebook, you wanted to create your version of Facebook, it should be very easy for people to move all their profiles elsewhere. You see what I'm saying? Because that content right now, when you put content up on Facebook, Google basically creates nothing. They don't create anything. Facebook creates nothing. All of their content is aggregation of individual human units of labor, right? All these things we publish. So that content is still owned by the individual, and we should have the right to move it to any platform overnight. And so the idea is to open it up. The idea is potentially make them public utilities. And the third thing is, in the whole discussion of net neutrality, which, by the way, Google and Facebook, et cetera, funded, they only went after the hardwire or the hardware of it, the telcos. They didn't go after the people who have the on-ramps to get on them, which is Google, Facebook, and Twitter. So the net neutrality discussion was a bogus discussion because they didn't really talk about the people who control access and to the publishing of that content. So if you want to really talk about net neutrality, we should really talk about those people who've essentially can choke access, like you were talking about, Ben, to upload and download content. And that's a whole different set of laws that cannot be, done by the existing politician because they frankly don't have the skills to do it.
If they get away with this, Dr. Shiva, I'm afraid what they're really after is like a Chinese-style censorship. They want an internet where only one voice is allowed. They're controlling deep state voice, and this is a very dangerous precedent if we allow them to continue to get away with this. And it's already happening that they're starting to branch out to ability to buy and sell. For example, I know PayPal has censored a great many on the far right. And some on the far right, some like Nazis like Andrew Anglin, yeah, they're pretty despicable people. But he's also entitled to his free speech. And when PayPal yanked his ability to make money, then he had to go somewhere else, and then they yanked it there and there. Well, now it's gone beyond that. Now certain banks are saying, well, you're not allowed to, we're not going to give out loans to anybody who belongs to NRA, for example. Now, where does this stop? And pretty soon you're not going to be able to do any banking, or especially online banking, if some of these oligarchs decide, hey, his profile, was a Trump supporter, we got to yank it. That's where it's heading if we don't stop it in its tracks now. Eventually, it's going to be a full onslaught of complete slavery and tyranny, and where people are basically have no access to any alternative information. We're just going to be brainwashed by whatever the deep state said, which is what they enjoyed for too many decades. I mean, they had like a monopoly on the mainstream media, which is now falling apart. People are able to find the truth find the real facts on the internet. And boy, they can't stand that. They have to control. Remember Hillary famously said that the internet needs an editor. Well, we're getting one now. I mean, people like Jack Dorsey, they'll get an algorithm. We don't have a physical editor maybe, but we'll develop an algorithm we'll stamp out all these, far right voices. And of course, it's always far right, isn't it? Anybody, just right to the center of Lenin is a far right automatically. So, and that's another thing that they're doing is, hey, if you don't agree with us, then you must be a fascist Nazi. You're Hitler, and it's supposed to beat up Hitler. But what they're doing is exactly what the Nazis did. The Nazis dehumanized Jewish people and enabled them to easier exterminate them because they were no longer humans. They were called all kinds of names. People just, there was such a dehumanization campaign. And guess what? The same thing is happening to conservatives now. If you're a conservative Trump supporter, with a MAGA hat in LA, you're fair target to be physically assaulted, because after all, you support Trump, you're Hitler. Oh yeah, we ought to beat up Hitler. You see this real simplistic mechanism that are very effective against ignorant people who have a proclivity toward violence. And we also see it in very symbolic terms, like the guy who took the axe to Donald Trump's star. It's okay for him to obliterate that star. And he was applauded by a lot of the organs on the left for doing it. Did they obliterate the adjacent star of Kevin Spacey, who's been accused of little children?
Good point. Great point.
I don't see any right wingers going and destroying Kevin Spacey's star, but only Trump's star gets destroyed because the right is not on the side of violence. And if anybody with a MAGA hat is assaulting somebody, boy, that's going to be all over the news, all 24/7, like you said.
See, I think one of the things, Ben, is the people who hate Trump. If in my view, as you unravel that, in India there was a caste system, right? You had the Brahmins, and by the way, in America, when we were collecting signatures, some of you may know, we're the first candidate on the ballot. This is a huge victory for us. We didn't pay one person for our signature. Everything was done bottoms up, which is unheard of. In fact, we had some people on our staff who were saying, "Oh, Shiva, you got to pay for signatures." I said, "We're not going to do that. We're going to do it bottoms up." What's interesting was when we go to collect signatures, Ben, the Indian Brahmins, and I could see them because we come from the untouchable caste, they would not sign for us. So in India, you had this caste system, right? You had the upper caste people who think they're better than everyone else. Well, in America, that's what we have. The upper caste are the academic elite, people like Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, et cetera.
Above the law.
Well, yeah, they're above the law, and they think everyone else is stupid. So when Trump won, he was basically a everyday white guy who wasn't part of their clique. Because look, I've been in New York, I've been in Hollywood. I know a lot of these people, and they all sort of screw each other and hang out among each other. And Trump was considered not part of them. And so when he won, what they were devastated by was that they lost control of everyday people. And it really comes down to control. You see, in the Indian caste system, you had the priesthood, the academic elite. The next layer below that was the business people, then the warriors, and then everyone below that. What's fascinating is in America, you have the Wall Street guys, the hedge fund guys. Those guys just care about profit. But what's really insidious is the academic elites care about something even more powerful than profit, and that's control. Here's a guy who's not making really that much money, right? But he wants to control a narrative, which can last hundreds or centuries after they die. They can write one paper, scientific paper, quote unquote scientific paper, and that becomes a theoretical base for the fake news media cutting and copying. One of the bigger scandals I think that's going to come out about Elizabeth Warren, which we're going to bring out, is something even bigger than the Native American thing. In 2005, and I'll show you, this is how the academic elite work. In the United States, let's say, Ben, you or Alan or Rob, any one of you guys wants to get a professorship at Harvard. Well, you get to be an initial, what's called an assistant or associate professor. And then you have a period of time, which is 7 years, to do meaningful research. And then you are voted on by your peers, whether you get to be tenured. And by the way, after you get tenured, it's basically you're in the club, right? You don't frankly have to work at all. Literally, you don't have to work, and you get paid. You get given great benefits, etc. Now, in order to get tenure, the way you do it is you have to carve out an area that you can say, I am the expert. Well, Elizabeth Warren, was advised that she would be the expert on bankruptcy law. Okay. So in order to do that in academia, you have to write a paper. And it doesn't matter if you publish a paper. Let's say Alan publishes a paper and Ben, you publish a paper. Same paper in bankruptcy field. The issue is, do other people cite your paper? They say, Dr. Garrison wrote an amazing paper. And if they don't cite Alan's paper, you will get tenure and Alan won't. Well, how do you get tenure? Well, how do you get your paper cited? Well, you have to kiss ass to all the other guys in the field. So nothing really innovative comes out. So Elizabeth Warren in 2005 wrote a paper saying that the reason she said 42% of small businesses were going out of business because were going bankrupt because they didn't have enough insurance, right? That because they didn't have medical insurance. In 2009, she upped the ante because no one challenged her on that and said 62% of small businesses went out of business because they didn't have insurance. Those two papers, she gets tenure. Those two papers become the basis for Barack Obama pushing down Obamacare. You see how that works? So that paper, because it comes from Harvard, has a Harvard logo, is published in the American Journal of Medicine, it must be the truth. In March of this year, 3 other professors who were not part of the clique went back through Elizabeth Warren's data. And they found out the way she culled her data together, it was bogus interviews. It's basically, Ben, she went to you and said, hey, Ben, you own a small business. How did you go out of business? Oh, I think it was because I paid high medical insurance. That's no different than asking a guy, how'd you get a heart attack? Oh, I think it was because of a lot of stress. So these professors went and redid the analysis. They actually looked at their credit reports, did a quantitative analysis. It was only 4%. Wow. So that's how these guys work. If they decide they want to move in a certain direction, they can overnight, like Monsanto is good. It doesn't hurt the public. It's the same as organic food. They get their engine together of academic sellouts, where basically it's all pay-to-play science right now. So my point is that President Trump has pointed out fake news, but the fake news behind the fake news is a fake science, which is pay-to-play science. Wow. And that's epicenter of that comes out of Massachusetts.
Wow. And this clique that you're mentioning is very widespread. It can also be called the swamp or the deep state.
I call it the sewer that feeds the swamp.
Well, these same people that are organizing like Bilderberger meetings, and they can discuss global policies. They're the same ones who drummed up this Russia lie, which it's a blatant lie. It's been disproven over and over, and yet they double, triple, quadruple down on it, and that's all you ever hear on CNN. It's like a drumbeat, because they know if they keep repeating it, people eventually say, well, there must be something to it. I hear it all the time. But there's absolutely nothing to it. And it's like these people are so used to gaslighting us and lying to us. Oh, it's like this thing about climate change that you always hear about. Well, 90% of the scientists, agree that the humans are causing this global warming, this climate change. But I was reading about, well, where did they get this figure? Well, they just drummed it up out of thin air, sort of like what Elizabeth Warren did. There's no such consensus among scientists that even carbon dioxide can cause heating. Yeah. And of course, they completely leave out things like the sun or, volcanoes going off. But my point is that they're so used to using these big lies against us for so long now that they're so used to controlling the dialogue. Yeah. And now they're kind of in a panic because they've lost control of the dialogue because people are starting to wise up. They can find the truth on the internet. And that's one of the reasons they're driving so hard at the hoop to shut down free speech on the internet. And that's just basically what it is. They want to get rid of the First Amendment. Yeah. They know they're trying to get rid of the Second Amendment. And our Fourth Amendment is all but obliterated because everything we do or say is recorded by the NSA, which is a felony. But for some reason, they're above the law and they're part of the clique. They don't ever have to face any consequences.
Yeah. Dr. Shiva has a great video on his YouTube channel about the what was it called? The Paris Accords. He does a really great breakdown. I encourage all people to check that out. And if you get into a debate about that issue, it's a great reference. We have the inventor of email. What a time to be alive, gentlemen. We have the inventor of email running against some kind of just nuts lady. I mean, she is ostensibly just impaired. You know, people who vote for her, who support her, you got to wake up. As you know, Dr. Shiva said at that rally, they really need to wake up. We have a guy with 4 degrees from MIT, a Trump loyalist, and just some impaired old woman. You know, she just needs to retire. That's really what it is. And I mean, if people can't see that, they need to, and they need to
getting rich on government.
Yeah, they need to subscribe to this channel. Guys, that was an hour. We just talked for an hour. I can't wait to host you both again. It was an incredible conversation. Mind-blowing info from Dr. Shiva. What did you think, Voice of Reason? Did you enjoy
amazing.
it?
Yeah.
Outstanding. America's #1 chadcast. Ben Garrison, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Shiva, as always. Can we pull up Dr. Shiva real quick?
Hey, Alan, one thing. Everyone should go to Shiva for Senate, and everyone should get a Road Warrior kit if you want to help. And everyone's busy. Most people are working people, unlike other of these political hacks. Go to the website, get a Road Warrior kit, 2 magnetic signs, which says only a real Indian can defeat the fake Indian. Put it on, $15. Everything's made in America, and that's how you can help. It's a very simple thing. Everyone should do this because only a real Indian can defeat the fake Indian, because a fake Indian does not care about the American working people. She cares about herself and the establishment.
All right, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for being here
Thanks,
so
man.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Ben.
guys.
Thank you.
America's #1 chadcast is signing off for tonight. Subscribe to this channel, guys. This night has been historical. Voice of Reason. What do you think about the streams we pulled off
double
tonight?
header, man. Just amazing.
Unreal. Anyways, talk to you guys soon and have an excellent evening. Peace.